Big fluff.
Hello, world. It's Stephanie Cmar, and I am here to tell you that I know some shit.
Exotica. Hello, everyone. I'm Joel Murphy. This is Stephanie Knows Some Shit, and with me, Stephanie Cmar.
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be in your earbuds right now. And Joel, I am so effing excited about today. Like, I can't even tell you that I did nothing in preparation for our first guest. Minds are going to be blown. Questions are going to be asked. It is going to be one of those episodes where you're like, what was his Instagram handle again?
I like that. I like you just peaking expectations right from the start. Let's hype this up before he ever speaks. Like, let's just get this as good as possible. I think this is
absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm not even fluffing up his ego. He is wearing a t-shirt that says anxiety right now. So I'm sure my little intro really calmed him down before we start. I feel really, really good about that. But so today we have my favorite friend from Instagram, Chris Kwan, who we are going to tell two different stories about how Chris and I met. We have never met in person. We do have each other's phone numbers now. So that's really exciting. That was like a step in our relationship. But so Chris and I met over Instagram, like when Top Chef started airing, I think before. Before?
It was before. Well, so it's funny about how this story is gonna be told, because I think you're right. We each have a different version of how we became friends. For me, I was your virtual friend back when you were a baby chef on season 10 of Top Chef. But I would say that we I think started talking via Instagram just before the All-Star season aired. And then I think as time went on, I was able to con you into believing that I'm a sane and normal person. And then that's kind of how the friendship basically started.
Chris, you've done such a good job. And I feel like I'm like, I would honestly say I'm a mediocre judge of character. Like, you have to do something for me to be like, ooh, that was not good. Like, really misread the room on that one. But I feel like you've been in my life for 10 years. Like,
well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, when Chris changed jobs, he sent me this, like, it wasn't even cryptic. It was like, I quit my job, and I literally called him just as I would like Kristen or Lindsay or my mom and dad. I was like, what is going on in your life? Like, explain everything to me. But yeah, so I feel like Chris has been in my life forever. But Chris, please tell the world what you think.
Sure. So, so thank you, first of all, Steph and Joel, for having me on this podcast. Obviously, I don't know to what I owe the honor of being the first guest on this incredible podcast. I had a lot of fun listening to the first episode today. But yeah, so when I think about kind of how our friendship kind of started, it really went back to Top Chef. And, I'm an accountant by profession, and food has always just been a really, really big passion of mine. And I've been a fan of Top Chef for a very long time. And the thing with something like Top Chef is, at the end of the day, you don't get to taste the food, right? So really you're watching for the characters, you're watching for the storylines, you're watching to learn something and to really kind of be a part of something that you can't really see or smell or taste. And so for me, it was about really being able to be connected to the chef testants that had really incredible stories to tell. And there was something about you, Steph, when I first started watching that really blew me away, because one, you have a great sense of humor. I love the personality. I love your storytelling, and I love the narrative that you were able to build for yourself as the seasons went on, and in all 3 seasons that you participated in. And once I was really drawn to again the stories that you could tell that you were telling, and in particular in the New Orleans season, there was an episode where you were challenged to make a dish that reminded you of home. Now, do you remember that dish, Steph?
I absolutely do.
So I remember you telling the story about making these mussels with white balsamic pickled peppers with homemade focaccia. And you told the story about how that dish reminded you of home because you and David would go mussel picking and it was a really big part of your life. And it's those stories that really drew me to a lot of the personalities on the show. And that's how I really kind of truly fell in love with you as a chef. And then, there were, as I started following you on Instagram and things like that, I remember that there was the trailer for the All-Star season, and they had these hints about who the chef testants were going to be. And your hint was that you were allergic to shellfish, which I remember from the crawfish challenge in New Orleans, and that you were eliminated based on a technicality. And we don't have to talk about that, but I have an opinion on that. Leave it in the dark. So I was like, it's going to be you. I was really excited. I picked you as my winner in my pool.
So close.
I know you were. I knew you were. I was rooting for you the whole time. And then as the season went on, I think I appreciated your vulnerability. I appreciated your honesty. And I appreciated you really, again, tapping into that authenticity. And that to me was really, that came through in your story arc. And, I started recreating some of your dishes, which was a lot of fun to be able to do. And then, yeah, I think I slid into your DMs one day, and then somehow we just became friends, I guess.
Absolutely. Not even changing cadence. You and I are friends.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, great. Wow. Great. That's awesome. So that's my version of the story, I think.
And I love that. I mean, it's also at a point of our friendship where David will be like, have you talked to Chris recently? And I'm like, do you mean Kristen or Canada Chris is what we call you. We have to that's right. The whole Canada thing. Perfect. But I would say that our friendship has grown in this really unique way. And this is why I always when I get those DMs, if people are passionate about cooking, I do my best to respond because I want to foster that. Not I have any hand in your cooking ability, which is natural and God-given, but
thank you.
You want to talk about food. You want to show these pictures. You want to explain this party. You want to do all that. That's kind of how I get my kicks.
Right.
So, we just immediately got on after that. And that is why you're here today, because there's so much that I know about you. And for everybody that doesn't know, Chris's Instagram handle is at Luna, Luna .culinary. He writes these beautiful captions about the food that he makes with insane pictures that aren't the ones where you're just like, dude, why are you, I'm never going to be able to do that. I feel like they have accessibility, but they also have these great stories about your parents, your grandparents, maybe something that you saw on TV that's inspiring. And I think that's what we lose a lot on social media is what's the real backstory? What is the real thing that you're doing? So I wanted to get you on here so that we could all learn your story, but I also think there's a lot for us to learn from it. And that's what I'm most excited about.
Well, Steph, I can say just thank you, first of all, for that introduction. It means a lot to hear that from you, just because you do know how much I adore and respect you as a person, and adore and respect you as a chef. So thank you very much. It's very validating to hear that from you, actually. So thank you. And I'm really incredibly excited to share the story. And
good.
Yeah. So I'm all yours for the next 45 minutes or an hour or whatever it is. So yeah, I'm really excited.
I love that.
Yeah, you already said something I'm very curious about in that intro, which was that you mentioned that you were recreating recipes from Top Chef. And so I'm curious about that. So you'd watch an episode. How did you recreate it? You would try to find the recipe online? Are you really just watching on TV to try to study how they're doing it? How does that process work?
Yeah, so it really is just watching something and trying to kind of pull all of the descriptors out of it. So as the judges start describing the flavors or the textures, or to kind of whatever footage you can watch of the chef actually creating something, I try to gather as much information as I can. And then I kind of take a step back and think, okay, well, if these are the ingredients and this is what my desired outcome is, how do I kind of reach into my toolkit of techniques and kind of things that I know how to do in the kitchen and try to get there. And the perfect example is so Steph's finale meal in All Stars, I think it was course 1, was a kataifi wrapped shrimp with tangerine syrup, and it was pickled Calabrian chilies and arugula, I believe. And I remember the story was obviously incredibly compelling for me, and I knew I had to figure out how to make it. So I'd used kataifi before, and I figured, okay, well, let's stick a skewer in the shrimp so it doesn't curl up, wrap it up, fry it. I pan fried it, and I know that there was some footage of her trying to pan fry it versus deep fry it, and so I just kind of played around with it, and then I just kind of got there. And then with making a fruit syrup, again, just trying to figure out, okay, if I had to make a fruit syrup, what would I do to get there? And the thing is that I have no idea if the dish that I made tastes at all like what Steph made, because obviously I've never eaten her food. But to me, trying to figure out how to create a dish has become like a hobby for me, and has become something that I've devoted a lot of time doing, because I think in doing so, and we can talk about this in a different angle as well when we kind of talk about kind of how I learned to cook, was trying to figure out and experiment and to really just try and be okay to fail is a big part of my learning process as someone who, I never went to culinary school. I've never worked on the line. Everything that I know how to do has been through self-directed, self-taught learning. So you kind of have to screw up in order to get to a point where you can create something that isn't awful. And so when you have that kind of mentality of, all right, let's just give it a shot. Sometimes you surprise yourself and sometimes you fall flat on your face, but you just get up and try again, I guess. So
I adore the way that you think. I think that's just, could we all have such an open mind?
When you recreate the dishes and they're done, do you find 3 people to sit at a long table and kind of like look at you and go like, did you mean to put this much salt and pepper? Like,
well, the thing is, I have a really incredible group of friends who have really indulge my creativity and give me an opportunity to be kind of a little wild and wacky and to be my critics and to give me that feedback. And I will say that I'm my own harshest critic more than anything. I have a very high expectation of myself if I'm going to do this. So, but no, it'd be really, I do have a bar kind of top in my kitchen that could theoretically sit 3 people. So I just need to go find someone as talented as Tom, and someone as worldly as Gail, and someone as thoughtful as Padma. So I don't know where I can find them here in Winnipeg, I suppose.
Boo boo, I don't know if you want that. It's really stressful.
It's a really funny story, because I'm gonna go on a bit of a tangent, because I've toyed with the idea of applying to Top Chef Canada before. And I remember I texted Steph one day and I said, hey, should I do this? And she was really encouraging. And she was like, yeah, just do it. I'll coach you. Like, yeah, we'll just set up some Zoom calls and I'll run quick fire drills at you and all that kind of stuff. And then I opened the application, and the first thing that it said was, list your professional cooking experience. And I said, well, I have none. So I think I automatically default out of being considered. But no, it sounds horribly stressful. I could imagine it being so. And again, it's easy to cook in my own kitchen when nobody's kind of watching me and I'm kind of, just doing my own thing. But yeah, the time pressure and being told what to cook is a scary thought. So
it's fun. I can't lie. It's like super fun, but it's just like, maybe I'll gag a little bit at the thought of people, even when we cook dinners for our events.
Yeah.
If they're like, do you want us to judge this? I'm like, that is the last thing I want.
Right.
Ever.
Right.
I just want you to enjoy it. Like,
right.
Ha ha ha. Don't
Absolutely.
do that, please.
Yeah. No, and that's I think I totally see it as being incredibly stressful. And you yourself, and I remember, I think part of the reason I thought your sense of humor was so great is you kept talking about stress vomiting in your first season, and
Absolutely.
I can relate to that pit in your stomach, and I just thought it was incredibly funny. So
I'm a puker. I don't think we've talked about it. Stress, happiness, motion sickness. And I can do it effortlessly. There can be a person next to me. They won't know. It's amazing.
you go.
That's just a little skill before we head into the real questions for Chris.
Sure.
Joel, you got anything before you start?
Sorry, there'll be a person next to you and they won't know? What does that mean?
Like the other day I made myself car sick driving, and I was on the phone. The Maserati. I was able to keep it down until I got out of the car. David was in the garage. I just went to the other side of the car, and I was fine. And I was like, do not let Bear go near this area.
So even David is
like,
unaware that you're vomiting.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's a gift.
It's a gift. It's a gift.
What if that was the thing that they teased for All Stars? Like that was your fact.
The person who set herself on fire in the swamp.
In the swamp. That was so bad. I feel like any of my close friends would be like, oh, it's Steph. Like, it's got to be Steph. Like, that's exactly who it is.
All right. Well, I jumped ahead so we kind of mentioned, like going back to the start. So yeah, where did this come from? Where did the journey of cooking begin?
Sure. Do you want to go back to childhood, or do you want to go back to kind of this era of my culinary adventure?
I'd love to hear a little bit about the role food played with you in childhood, because I know for myself, food was not important to it was important to my family, but like my mom doesn't like to cook. My father does not really care for cooking. So what sparked your love of taste, I guess, is the best way to word the question.
Sure. So to maybe guys go back to kind of my background and my history. So I was born here in Winnipeg, Canada, to an immigrant, a set of immigrant parents. So my parents are both from Hong Kong. My dad came to Canada when he was, I think, 14 or 15. And I think my mom was like 11 or 12. And they met here in university, got married, and I was born here. And I was raised in a pretty traditional Cantonese household. And it was a multi-generational household. So my parental grandmother actually lived with us growing up. And she actually went from son to son to take care of all of the grandkids as an additional caregiver, which is very common in our culture. And my dad is actually the youngest of all of his siblings. So I had some cousins that may have gotten 3 or 4 years with grandma. But by the time she came to live with us, my younger brother and I, being the youngest grandchildren, we got to spend our entire lives with grandma. And grandma was a very important matriarch kind of in our family. And to have that caregiver there who really, cooking was such a big part of that, just in that she was a great cook. And our culture is very driven by food, and food is part of every gathering. And there's this running joke that you never ask somebody how they're doing. You never say, I love you. The way that we say I love you is to ask if you've eaten yet, because that is kind of the core fundamental virtue that we hold so dear. And our way of showing that we care about you is to offer you food, because that's just how we do it. So growing up, food played an incredibly important part of my upbringing in many different ways. So there was grandma's very traditional Cantonese home cooking at home. My dad was actually a restaurateur, actually. So he is actually... Yeah, well, he owned a steakhouse for a number of years, and he sold it actually when I was in high school. So it was for a portion of my life, but not anymore. He's been out of the restaurant business for, since I was 15, so like 15, 16 years now. And so, I never worked in that kitchen. I never took my dad never really taught me too many chef skills or anything like that, but I was always kind of present and immersed in restaurant culture. Like the restaurant was a 15-minute walk from home. So, we go out for dinner, or, I'd stop in after school or whatever it was. So it was kind of a second home for us. So I was always kind of immersed in it, but I wasn't truly part of it. So there was kind of that influence. And then on my mom's side of the family, my grandfather actually opened a Chinese restaurant many generations ago. And then when he first immigrated to Canada, and then that got passed down through a couple of uncles and through a couple of generations there. And similarly, I packed takeout orders, and I may have, bust some tables, but again, I never worked in that kitchen or anything like that. But just always being surrounded by food was kind of my upbringing. So it was very, very much a big part of it. And then, in a very common story, I would say with a lot of immigrant or children of immigrant families is, I grew up in a pretty sleepy suburb of Winnipeg. And just for context to listeners, geographically, I'm kind of smack dab in the middle of Vancouver and Toronto, kind of just north-ish of like Minneapolis, Minnesota kind of area. So, it was a little bit of a sleepy suburb. And, the story of bringing these very traditional Cantonese lunches to school when all my friends were having peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and pizza pockets and mac and cheese, it was a jarring contrast. And, and a lot of the flavors that were very common in my upbringing, were maybe a little bit jarring. And, a lot of the flavors we talk about now being really bold and spicy and umami and pungent, that there are very positive connotations to those flavors nowadays. I would say for a 7-year-old in Winnipeg at the time in, the school cafeteria, it didn't really garner me very many friends. So there was this period of my life where I was kind of going through this kind of identity crisis, if you want to call it that, where I really started to actively rebel against that part of my identity and trying to assimilate and all of that kind of stuff. And I have a lot of empathy on why I felt I needed to do that at that time. And then once I kind of got into my 20s and, I kind of grew up a little bit and matured a little bit. And I think I realized that I needed to really lean in to that identity and really pay homage to it and to learn about it and to keep that tradition going. Because if I didn't, then it was just going to go away. So that is really kind of my journey of then getting to the point now where I'm leaning into a lot of the flavors and techniques of Hong Kong cuisine, but interpreting them through the lens of, growing up in the diaspora, having never been to Hong Kong, never trained in a Chinese kitchen, and trying to do things in a way based on a lot of the Western techniques that I've learned and grown accustomed to. And, it's not necessarily a unique story. I know there are a lot of individuals like myself that are kind of reclaiming their identity through food, but that's really kind of how I've gotten to this point. And I think that's what drives that passion now is that, when I was trying to cook other people's food, it was very obvious to me that I was cooking other people's food. It's a great way to learn, but it's not a great way to be authentic. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think that really
does. Like
that really is kind of my story. Yeah, that's kind of really the origin story, I would say.
Do you have favorite Chinese cookbooks?
So
like the ones where you're like, okay, that really makes sense on like a cooking technique or a concept or a flavor that you might not necessarily like.
Yeah, so I would say that a lot of kind of the foundational traditional techniques that I've learned are really from through osmosis, from watching my grandmother growing up and a lot of those sense memories, and then talking to my parents and really trying to kind of take away as much as I possibly can. I don't know that I've found a cookbook, at least one written in English, that really perfectly kind of captures a lot of traditional Cantonese cooking techniques, or at least I haven't. So if there are any listeners out there that know any, please let me know. Slide into my DMs, please. But in terms of other books that, like I was saying, other chefs that have similar stories as myself, one that I really, really love came out, I think last year. It's Brandon Jiu's book, Mister Jiu's in Chinatown. It is
so good.
It's so good. And it is, more than anything, it is a perfect cultural snapshot of the history and culture and cultural richness of San Francisco's Chinatown. And then his recipes, while they really do a great job of kind of tipping the hat to really traditional techniques and flavors, really, really imaginative and really kind of a really kind of modern American take on it. So I think that's an incredible book. And then the other one I will say is, this is a new one that I just picked up recently. It's Christina Cho's Milk Bread and Mooncakes. And
literally ordering right now. I don't even need to look at it.
So in that book, she's a food blogger, and she really demystifies a lot of the techniques surrounding Chinese bakery items. And I'm not a baker, and it's too much measuring. And I'm more of an intuitive cook. I don't really like to measure. But that book was the first book that I read that really clued in to me and taught me kind of some of the science and the technique behind why Chinese bakery goods are the way they are. Like, I've never understood how those buns can be so damn soft. And I get it now. But so that book is one that I've learned a lot from. And then
Literally just ordered it.
Perfect.
Yep.
Christina Cho, if you're listening right now, I get a commission.
Yeah. Hey, girl. Hey. Way to go.
And then, so I think those would probably be the two that I would say are most influential for me in terms of specifically to Chinese cuisine.
Hey, this is Chris.
And this is Joe from the Curioso Podcast.
And we give our stamp of Curioso approval to the podcast that you're listening to right now.
I think there's something beautiful about watching your grandmother cook as a child, and whomever else might have done so. And I do think there's a lot of intuition, because when you watch somebody cook, and this is why we all love cooking shows, whether they be like a straight up cooking show or cooking competition, I don't think it matters very much. You just see it. You're just like, oh, like I could have been doing this better. I could have seen this. Like I just really understand now. And I think that's beautiful that you see it. And it's a great reminder for everybody to be like, even though you're like, oh, my guilty pleasure is watching Top Chef, you're probably picking up on a lot more than you realized. So I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. And part of cooking too is, and I think you guys touched on it in your first episode about being a good cook is one thing, but being a good teacher is a completely different thing. And especially because cooking is so much more than a set of instructions, right? There's a lot of intuition and all of your senses are engaged, right? You're smelling, you're tasting, you're seeing, you're hearing, you're feeling. And a lot of that, and I use the term sense memory a lot, because when I would think back to my grandmother, a lot of it was sound. Because there's one Chinese technique that I think is incredible, is a hot oil, a sizzling oil technique. So we would do things like steamed fish, and then we put a bunch of aromatics on top of the fish, so ginger, scallions, some garlic, and you heat up some oil up to 400, 450 degrees, and then you pour it over the aromatics, and you hear this incredible sizzle. And then your entire kitchen fills with the smell of ginger, garlic, and scallions. And to me, that's not a flavor. That's a scent, that's a sight, and that's a sound. And that can be very difficult to translate in recipes. So to me, a lot of the memories that I draw on have nothing to do with taste.
Oh, I love that so much. Also, in restaurants, when we had to baste with like thyme and shallots, that sound of the popping.
Oh, of course.
That's just like music to my ears.
Right. But how do you describe that to someone who's never done it before, right? Is that you wait for the shallot to pop and you wait for the thyme to crackle and pop in your face? Yeah,
people will be like, I don't want to do that. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Right.
Really brilliant descriptions. Thank you.
Nice.
And so when did this passion for cooking manifest into the Luna Culinary and I keep saying Instagram, and I feel like you need so much more credit than that, but that is your platform. That is where you go to share with all of us.
Yes.
I have friends that follow you who do not cook, and I'll be like, oh, we have, like tonight, I was like, my friend Chris is going to be on the podcast, and they like knew exactly who you were, because, you take pictures that make you hungry, and that's really hard to do a lot of the time. I feel like when I look at certain food pictures, I'm like, oh, that looks nice, or that looks cheesy, or that looks like, and I mean like actual cheese, not cheesy.
Right.
That looks crispy, that looks something. You're not doing videos, which is also very interesting. So, but you're still like, shit, I just really want a chicken wing. I want a burger. I want this really foo-foo thing that you made, so.
Sure.
When were you like, this is going to be, and I hope you didn't put the pressure on yourself that I'm making it sound like, but like, when were you like, oh, this is cool. I love this. I'm going to spend my weekends doing this and dedicate time, and it costs money. You also don't use cheap products. Like when were you like, okay, let's just dive in? Or are you one of those people that dives?
I think that I am one of those people that just naturally dives. You know, if I'm passionate about something, I think I invest my heart and soul into it. But to, I guess, maybe address a couple of elements of your question, I think the first thing is I kind of decided that I wanted to create a project that really was a journal or a diary of kind of this culinary adventure. And when I started, I had no idea what that was going to be. So I started the Instagram, 3 or 4 years ago or whatever it was. And that was the platform at the time, right? Like TikTok wasn't here yet. And it was just photos. So that was the platform that was available to me at the time. And I just kind of put some stuff up there. I toyed with the whole blogging thing and writing out recipes and doing the 17 paragraphs of, it was a drizzly Tuesday and I learned how to do this or whatever. And I toyed with that, and it didn't make sense to me. It wasn't my personality, and it wasn't, and no disrespect to people that do that. It's just that wasn't what I wanted to achieve. So I kind of got to this point where I just started to kind of find my own way. And again, I wasn't afraid to fail. So you try, didn't work. Oh, this was popular, or this made sense. And I just kind of kept going. And I think I started to find my voice again once I really started leaning into kind of my identity and that kind of being authentic and telling these stories, and having a caption limit in an Instagram post was actually incredibly important to me, because it prevented me from rambling for too long. It forced me to be succinct, and it forced me to be very to try to be as communicative as possible while under these character limitations. So things just kind of started evolving from there. And then I was like, okay, well, this is getting more fun. So I went and got a new camera. I got a new camera lens, and things just kind of started evolving from there. I connected with a local ceramics artist, and I had her hand make me dozens and dozens of ceramics that I used to plate on. And it just kind of took on a little bit of a life of its own. And I don't really know how else to describe it. And I've had a lot of comments of people saying, oh, you should go do the TikTok videos, or you should go and do the ASMR videos. And to me, that doesn't interest me. That doesn't excite me, because it's not my identity and what I want to kind of create. And I've kind of developed I don't like the word brand per se, but I've developed my aesthetic. And to me, that is, I hope anyway, if you are a follower of mine and one of my photos comes up on your feed, you can see that, oh, this is Chris. And that to me is the most important part of kind of where I've kind of gotten to. So yeah, it really just started it was just necessity, and it's just kind of evolved over time.
I love that. This is a side note. And you guys, I think your mind's about to be blown, because all of my friends that and now I'm just sharing this with everybody. Yeah. I watch ASMR videos on mute.
What?
Of people eating. I know.
So if you're not listening to the voices that sound like this, then what is the point of watching an ASMR video?
I love watching people eat and enjoying things. I don't know how to describe it, but it'll be like 3:00 in the morning. I'll wake up in the middle of the night. I'll go on Instagram. I don't want to look at like people I know, because then I get invested and we go down a rabbit hole. So like the videos of them eating enoki mushrooms.
Ooh, I love it.
Mute. I do too. Mute. Taco Bell. Mute. Doesn't matter what it is. All of it is on mute.
I'm gonna just start live streaming me eating dinner just for you, Steph.
I'll be totally into it. It's like a weird thing. It's a weird thing. And Joel, what were you about to say? Sorry, I cut you off.
Oh, no, you're good. No, I was curious because you were talking about the branding of, it seems like you made a decision that I'm curious about too. There's not a lot of photos of you, or like a lot of behind the scenes photos. It really is the food. And so I was curious why that choice to, because it's a very professional website, like Instagram, and it's a very like food focused. But yeah, like as you were saying, because as you were talking about like TikTok and all these other things, a lot of times it's very much about the person as much as the food. But it seems like you have this like, it is about the food, like kind of mentality.
No, I appreciate that feedback, Joel, and I thank you for that assessment. It means a lot to me to hear you say that, because you've really captured it. Because quite frankly, and that's part of the reason why actually I was really nervous to come on this podcast, actually, because I don't think I'm that interesting, and I don't know that I love to hear myself talk, and I don't know that I love to see myself in photos or anything like that, and I don't want. I don't want, I guess, who I am as a person or anything like that to really, I guess, muddy up the story, maybe, because to me, especially the kind of purpose that I'm trying to portray right now, and we can talk about this in a little bit more depth, is, this idea of kind of reclaiming Cantonese food in North America in a very different light, right? And you think back to what do people know of Chinese food, and I think Padma did a really good episode of Taste the Nation on this on Cantonese food, and talking about chop suey and the history of systemic racism and Cantonese food being cheap and greasy and not good for you and all of these kind of things. There's a lot of negative connotation behind that, and for me, I've really taken pride in highlighting the beauty of the ingredients and highlighting the beauty of the techniques and the flavors and the food. And in doing so, I don't know that me showing my face is really going to add or detract from the story. I want to focus on the food. And the other part of it too is, I'm single. I live by myself. I don't have anybody to take pictures of me. So, so that's also another reason. But
you can take after me and just do other people's bathroom selfies.
There are hundreds of selfies on my phone. I just don't post them all. So,
and just so everybody knows, Chris is incredibly handsome and has a beautiful voice for radio. But I just don't want anybody to think he's just like fuddy and sad in his single apartment. He is handsome and smart and an incredible cook. I just have to say that it's just one of those things. If I don't say it, I literally can't live with myself. So
thank you.
That's all I'm going to say about his looks.
You could also always do, it's the guy Babish, right? Like you could do that where he does the chest down angle of himself where he's cooking.
Such a good shot.
Yeah.
And maybe here's another thing about that too. And I've never tested this theory, but part of it too is if you were to actually watch me go through the process of conceptualizing, cooking, plating, photographing a dish, to have to film all that footage and edit it down, and it's just so much more work.
Sucks.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I've already spent 3 hours just to get this one picture. Now I have to spend another 3 hours to edit this video to make it interesting that someone's going to watch. And I don't really like the way I look on video anyway. Like it's just not really
No, it's like writing a blog post. It really, if you're not passionate about it, it does not resonate. Right. And it's a job. It's not something enjoyable. Right.
And I think that's important. And I think, and I know you hit on this as well, Steph, in terms of, this project to me, it's a passion project and it's been an investment. But I'm fortunate in that, I have a day job that pays my mortgage and I have the ability to invest my spare time and my funds, I guess, into this project. And you guys talked about it last week as well, about this idea of, amateur cooks. And if just because you really want to cook, do you have to make it a profession? And it's something that it's this idea that I have a thought experiments with myself with all the time about, do I want to monetize this? And, I get DMs of, hey, do you want to be a brand ambassador for this? Or can you develop a recipe for this product? Or do you want to do this or that? And to me, again, it doesn't really excite me, because as soon as that passion is gone, then it's just another job, and I don't need another job. I want this to be my passion project, and I want to invest my energy into something that makes me happy. I want to invest my time and attention in something that brings me joy. I show up in my suit in my office all day playing with spreadsheets, and then I go home and I want to make myself dinner, and that's what I want to do. So that it all comes down to, I do it because I want to do it, not because anybody else is telling me I should do it. And
I think that's incredibly inspiring and beautiful. I spent the entire day making beaded bracelets. Like, no joke. I've sat here for 6 hours. And why did I do it? I was relaxed. I was having fun. Nobody wants these. Did I make one for my friend Anne? Absolutely. Is she going to wear it? I doubt it. But
if you send me one, I will wear one. Like,
okay,
I will. I
Yeah,
promise you I'll wear it.
Yeah, if I can get on
Thank
this
you.
list too,
Okay.
I'll start where we can have like a beaded
God.
bracelet like podcast crew. I'm into it. Like
I'm so into this, and I'm like, the wheels are turning. But I think that there's something responsible to own the fact this is not going to be career 2.0. This is just, I love this. And when you take that pressure off yourself, I think that that's just like glamorous. You're making it about you and what you enjoy. And I think what we all struggle with on a day-to-day basis is trying to create everything into more than what it is. Now, your cooking is inspiring and beautiful, and I can wax poetic about it as for the next hour, but I can also feel that you enjoyed the entire process. Joel has other podcasts where I'm just like, he loves to make these podcasts. I'm going to be the next David Yurman. I don't know, but there's something so great, and something that I've always criticized myself about was that I didn't have hobbies. And so I always admire people that really, really do. I just think it's such a beautiful thing. And again, I just would love everybody to check out what Chris is doing, because not only it's like we've all seen pictures, we all get it, but the backstories are so interesting as to how you conceptualized it, how you came up with it. And I guess that's my next question is,
Sure.
If you had to pick that meal growing up eating, like I know for me, this is so weird, but my mom, like 5 out of 7 nights a week, she made spaghetti with ground meat, Prego sauce, and then she would take a little diet ginger ale, which she kept under the sink, put a swig in that in the jar, and pour that into the Prego-y meat concoction that she made.
what was that
Why?
doing? Yeah.
We do not know.
Yeah.
I think it was because my grandma used to make it for us, and she was born in the Depression. So like waste not, want not, like get every drip out. But never water, always diet ginger ale.
And sometimes, especially when it comes to, parents or things like that, there's no need to question it, right? Like that was what it was, how it was done, and let's respect the way that it was done. And it's a memory, and it's something that we can be proud of. We don't necessarily have to replicate it, but we love it, right?
Yeah.
So it's that love, and that's the thing, is that food is love at the end of the day, and how it comes together is secondary in a lot of ways. So
yeah. So did you have that dish where your mom, your dad, your grandma, your whomever made, and you were just like, that was the one where you were like, F yeah. Yes.
Yeah, so I have 2 stories to tell on this one. So one, I will say that one of my favorite memories of something that my grandmother would make. It's a very traditional Cantonese preparation for chicken, and it's called white cut chicken, is how you would actually translate the name of the dish. And it's called that because it's basically a poached chicken. And the skin is white, and you cut it afterwards. So clearly, we're very creative in naming our dishes. But
I like it though. I know exactly what I'm getting.
But the way that the dish is prepared is you can do any kind of chicken. You can use chicken legs or thighs or whatever it is, or you can do a whole chicken, and you're submerging it in a poaching liquid with a lot of aromatics. So ginger, scallions, garlic are kind of our trinity of aromatics, and you basically bring the water up to a boil with the meat inside, and then you basically turn the heat off, and you just let it poach very, very gently in this warm broth, and you get this incredibly tender, succulent meat. And it's really simple, and it's really straightforward. But there's a beauty to the way that it tastes at the end, and it's served with this ginger scallion sauce that to me is magical. So it's basically minced scallions, minced ginger, and a clove of garlic, and then that oil technique that I talked about previously. You heat up some neutral oil up to 450 degrees, and then you just pour it over the aromatics, and you let it sizzle and gently cook, and you get this incredibly beautiful kind of salsa verde kind of vibe, if you want to call it that, and you serve that with the chicken. And in particular, the sense memory that I remember from that is that my grandmother would do everything by hand. You know, she wasn't a food processor kind of gal. So she had a giant cleaver and she'd sit there and she'd mince the garlic and the ginger and the scallions by hand. So, you know, when I heard the sound in the living room, I knew that's what we were going to have for dinner. And so to me, that was a very important, again, sense memory. It has nothing to do with flavor, all to do with sound. So that's a dish that really was a really positive food memory for me as a child. And I recreate versions of that now, and it's a really simple way to cook it. If you do, you know, go buy some chicken thighs, you can put that entire dish together in 20 minutes, right? So it's
I know it's giving
really
me like
quick.
I know this is totally different, but like Hainanese chicken vibes.
It is very similar to Hainanese chicken. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
It's the very, very similar. But kind of a regional variation, I guess you could call it, in the same way that, just a regional variation of a very similar chicken preparation for sure. Absolutely.
The day I discovered that dish, my mind I was like, you just look at it and you're like, boiled chicken, that's cool.
Right.
And then you have it and you're like, I can taste the lineage. Like, I don't know. It's exciting. You're like, we don't cook like that anymore. So there's beauty in that. And you're saying it's simple. And I mean, in theory it is, but what you get is like complexity, and you have to love the process of cooking this dish in order for people to feel that love too. Of course. And I think, again, it harkens back to those memories, right? And I think that's why it's important to me. And again, that's where that passion comes from. And then the second story I want to tell, and you're going to have to follow me on this journey a little bit as I tell this story. So I apologize. I'm talking a lot. No, this is what we want.
Your listeners are going to be like, what the hell is this guy going on about?
No, they're going to be like, this is inspiring. How do we get even an ounce of this passion? Yeah. Honestly.
Thank you. So the other dish that I think about a lot is, and it's really funny. And I never asked my grandmother this question, but, you know, I wasn't sure if I was a really picky child or anything like that. But I have a lot of memories of my grandmother making me white rice with melted butter and soy sauce on it.
The best.
And it's the best, right?
It's the best.
It's the best, right? Because you have that rich, fatty unctuousness of the butter. You have the umami salinity of the soy sauce. White rice, perfect vehicle for it. It's delicious. And, you know, grandma was ahead of her time because everybody's doing miso butter and soy butters and all that kind of stuff nowadays, right? So grandma was well ahead of her time back in 1993. So that was always a sense memory that I had. And in my kind of current culinary journey, I've developed this dish that really draws from that initial inspiration. And I don't want to call it my signature dish, but it's a dish that I think really truly captures the vision that I have culinarily. So to me, the logical extension of soy sauce and butter is butter turns to brown butter because you want that rich, nutty, umami flavor that you get from the brown butter. And then soy sauce becomes fermented black soybeans. So incredibly pungent, lots of depth, lots of richness, that's salinity. So fermented soybeans and then brown butter to me is a very natural pairing. And then thinking to black beans, what do we traditionally pair black beans with? When you have beef with black bean is a very traditional Cantonese stir-fry dish. And typically it's the beef that's sliced really thin. You have some peppers and onions stir-fried in this brown sauce with some black beans. And then it tastes great on rice. So I decided to then kind of flip it a little bit and do a little bit more of a Western style steak preparation by taking a ribeye and searing it, basting it in brown butter with the thyme and the shallots that you're talking about, and then spreading this really rich, pungent black bean sauce on top of the steak, and then basting it again to kind of seal in that that black bean flavor with the brown butter. And it's my favorite way to prepare a steak now. I think that perfectly captures this kind of drawing on flavors and techniques of Cantonese cuisine, but in a way that makes sense for me. Searing a steak, right? So it really goes back to that original memory of me being 4 years old and having rice with soy and butter, and it's become something so much more than that.
I love that. There's an episode of Tokyo Diner, Midnight Tokyo Diner. It's on Netflix.
Okay.
I've watched this series so many times. Can't understand a word they're even saying, but I got subtitles, so it's good. And there's a woman that comes in. It's all about, guests and diners, and he'll cook anything if he has it. And this woman or it was a man, he just wanted rice, soy sauce, butter. And he sits there with his soy sauce bottle, if you will, and he just puts what he considers the perfect amount. And this was like an aristocrat, a very wealthy man, but this was his comfort food. And I'd never had it. I did not grow up in a Cantonese household. Southern American. And I loved the image of the precision to make it taste like a memory. Like, fuck, that's beautiful. I was trying not to swear.
Yeah. You have a swear word in the name of your podcast. What's the point?
Shit is a body function, I guess. I don't know.
But so is that word you just said.
Very true, Chris.
I mean, let's. Are we going to be? Is this a PG-13 podcast or is this a rated R podcast?
I just think one of my clients, I would like their children to listen to it, but we've ruined it for. It's all right, Alex, Tom. I'm sorry.
So you can bleep this later in post. It's
exactly.
Yeah,
but
Apple Podcasts already made us have an explicit tag just based on the name. So I think we should earn it. Like, that's the thing is we're going to have an explicit tag on it. Yeah. I mean, it's like, just lean into what the fuck this is. Like, yeah.
Absolutely.
Chris, I find it so interesting that you were able to take this concept, like the brown butter makes sense to me, but then to add the fermented black beans, like, I want to try it. And I do not particularly like steak because, as Joel could tell the world, I've choked on just about everything, steak being high up there on the choke list.
Jeez.
But I think that's so cool. And I'm just tooting your horn, because right now I forgot that we're a podcast and we're not just listening to Storytime by Chris. But I think that's really unique.
But you actually teed us perfectly because we are running out of time, but you segued, I think, very naturally into how we like to end, which is if you have a story, and Stephanie's stories do often involve choking or ERs or things like Hospitals. But if you have a sort of like cooking horror story, personal injury, catastrophe, that would be a great place, I think, to end it.
So, like I kind of alluded to earlier, having never worked on the line and never went to culinary school, I don't really have a whole lot of those type of stories. I loved your story last week, Steph, by the way, in terms of slamming your finger in the door. It was
so embarrassing.
It's incredible. But I was thinking about, just if I have a similar story, and I'll give you an example of what I was talking about earlier in terms of sometimes experiments just don't go well. So I'll tell you about the time that I made a dish that quite literally made me want to throw up and want to throw in the towel because it was disgusting.
I'm already
it was disgusting.
So into this.
Well, I think I may have told you this story already, Steph. So
I do too, but tell me again.
So in Cantonese cuisine, we have an ingredient known as fermented tofu. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's tofu that has been fermented. Sometimes it's seasoned with things like sesame oil or chili or rose water or things like that. And it has this incredible pungency that I can't describe other than it's fermented tofu. It's funky smelling, tasting tofu. And the texture of this fermented tofu is similar to a pate or similar to like a really soft cheese. And I thought to myself one day, here, let's try to do something creative with this and see how we can come up with something. So I thought to myself, okay, it has the texture of like a foie or a pate or a chicken liver mousse or something like that. So play off of that idea. So I thought, okay, a chicken liver mousse or a pate, what would you serve it with? You serve it on some crusty bread. You have some acidity. You have some sweetness. You have all. So I pickled some cherries. I sliced some apricots. Got some great local sourdough. Yeah, you do. You do. Eh? So so then I was like, let's make a fermented tofu mousse. So I took this fermented tofu and I mixed it with some creme fraiche, and then I mixed it with heavy cream, and I whipped it into like funky tofu whipped cream. And it was, I don't know why I thought it was a good idea at the time because it clearly wasn't. But it was truly one of the most horrific things I'd ever made. And it was not good. And I can't even justify any element of it. And I served it to someone. And,
Oh no.
and I don't know that I should have. So I guess that's my horror story. But I think the upshot of that is, never be afraid to fail. Try, experiment. And if there's any advice that I want to leave, I guess, your listeners with, Steph and Joel, is that, whether you're a professional chef or you're someone like me who's just a really passionate home cook, is give yourself leverage and give yourself space to experiment, to try, to fail, and to try again, and to just be authentically you. Because I don't know who else I could be at this point in my journey. So
I think that's so beautiful. And Chris, thank you. This has been I wish we could talk for the next 4 hours. Honestly, I have so many questions, and just, I think that what you provided us with and what you just ended with is sort of the mindset we should all go into things, whether it be cooking, whether it be anything, math, science, swimming, bike riding. Give yourself leverage, because you're the master of your own craft when you're not employed by it.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, really amazing. So, Chris, thank you so incredibly much for being our first guest. That was a wonderful interview.
Thank you so much for giving me so much time to talk. I don't know. I don't know that I've talked this much in such a long time.
Loved it.
I also, man, I think it's so cool. I'm still caught up on the fact that you have people reaching out to you, offering you, and that you're turning it down. That is the coolest thing to me, because I would not do that. I would take money from people. So I respect your commitment to keeping it a hobby, and I think that's wonderful. But yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to do it. At luna.culinary on Instagram.
Absolutely.
Follow it.
Can I leave with one? With one little tidbit on my actual Instagram handle? We actually talked a lot about my grandmother, and it's important for me to note that Luna is in tribute to my grandmother. Her name in Cantonese actually means moon, and she actually passed away last year, a year ago, January. At the age of 102. So she lived a long life. And branding this project after her was a very important part of the story as well. So.
Oh, well, she's in our thoughts. And I just love that. I have such a big smile on my face. Again, podcast, it's hard to really show the emotion, but I mean, just gorgeous. And
thank you.
Yeah, again, Chris, I think people are going to there's going to be bits we can all have this resonate with us.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I really do. And thank you for giving me a platform to share my story. And thank you, both of you, for being so open-minded and inquisitive and thoughtful in the conversation. It means a lot to me to have an audience to share this with. So thank you.
Our pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so Luna Culinary, make sure to check it out. If you have videos of you eating, slide into Stephanie's DM and send those to her.
On mute, please.
On mute. No sound. No sounds. Just the videos. Yeah. Just you eating silently. That's the thing that she wants. So send those to her.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
But yeah, that's going to do it for us. So yeah, thanks so much for listening, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. We still don't know how to sign off on this lovely podcast, but I'm Stephanie with my great friend, Joel. And if you're confused, we probably are too, but together we can figure it out.
Stephanie Knows Some Shit is hosted by Stephanie Cmar and me, Joel Murphy, and produced by me. If you enjoyed the show, give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, and instead of a review, tell us about a meal that you ate or made recently. We'd love to read about it.
Hey guys, it's Sean.
And Carter.
From Potato.
Salad.
Marmalade.
Aid.
Potato Salad Marmalade. Another podcast here on the Peak Sloth Network. Check it out.